We bet your first reaction to this is, how is that even possible? As much as this is funny and unbelievable, it is an event that happened. Australia. The country went to war with birds and they lost. Okay, let's get into how all of this happened. Please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. We have a goal to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Please help us hit our goal. First, let's explore what kind of birds the emu is. The emu is a species of flightless birds. Flightless birds are birds that have lost the ability to fly. The major reason for this is evolution. Ostriches, for example, are also flightless birds. They are the biggest species of flightless birds. Emus are the second biggest. Emus have soft brown feathers with long necks and legs. They can reach up to 1.9 meters in height. To put this in context, a big species can be taller than a short adult human. However, they weigh only as much as a human toddler and small adult humans. Nevertheless, when you think of them as birds, they're big birds. Due to their size and lack of flight, they have bipedal runners that can travel great distances and when necessary can sprint at 48 kilometers per hour or 30 miles per hour. Emus feed on a variety of plants and insects, but can go weeks without eating. They also didn't drink water frequently and were even a source of food for indigenous Australians and early European settlers. Generally, emus are not considered aggressive towards humans. However, they can become defensive if they feel threatened or cornered and then exhibit unpredictable behavior. Emus were only found in Australia. They live throughout most of the continent, ranging from coastal regions to high in the snowy mountains. They were once found in Tasmania, but were exterminated soon after Europeans arrived. At some point, there were between 625,000 to 725,000 wild emus in Australia. That's a crazy number right there. So how did the Emu War start in Australia? You see, after World War I, a lot of discharged veterans who served in the war were given land by the Australian government. This land was for them to take up farming within Western Australia, often in agriculturally marginal areas. These are rural areas where farming conditions are more difficult due to natural constraints like poor climate, poor physical characteristics, or difficult cultivation. After these farmers were given the land, they started to have difficulties. These difficulties started when the Australian government failed to deliver subsidies to them after promising to. Despite not delivering on their promised subsidies, the price of wheat, which the farmers were producing, continued to fall. This became worse to the extent that the farmers were threatening to not deliver the wheat after harvest. This was around October 1932. While all of this was happening, about 20,000 emus arrived, and as you would expect, worsened the farmers' difficulties. Emus are a migrating species. They regularly migrate after their breeding season and head to the coast from the inland regions. In this case, they found that the lands cultivated by the Australian farmers were very good habitat. Then the attack began. These newly migrated emus started to enter the farm territory, consumed and spoiled the crops, and left gaps in the farm fences that enabled rabbits to cause even further damage. It was a disaster. Imagine how much damage 20,000 creatures as tall as small adult humans can do. Even more to farmers who were already facing difficulties of their own. Exactly. It was a sore sight, an experience for these farmers. The farmers related these concerns to the Australian government and involved the Ministry of Defense. Now, remember that these farmers had served in World War I, so they were very familiar with the effectiveness of machine guns. The machine gun was one of the deadliest weapons in World War I, causing thousands of casualties. It was a relatively new weapon at the start of the war. These ex-fighter farmers then requested the deployment of machine guns to face the emus. Wonder why no other options were initially explored? The Minister of Defense readily agreed to this request and gave conditions. The first condition was that the guns were to be used by military personnel. The second condition was that troop transport was to be financed by the Western Australian government, and the farmers would provide food, accommodation, and payment for the ammunition. The minister also thought that the birds would make good target practice for the military personnel. However, many have argued that the support was only rendered to the farmers to prevent a brewing Western Australian secession. The war was due to start in October 1932. However, it didn't begin until November of that same year because of rain. The rainfall then caused the emus to scatter over a wide range. By 2nd November 1932, troops were deployed. These troops were under the command of Major Gwynedd Purvis Winnie Aubrey Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery's 7th Heavy Artillery. They were ordered to collect 100 emu skins so their feathers could be used to make hats. The war begins. Round 1. The men traveled to Campion on 2nd November and sighted about 50 emus. However, the birds were out of their guns' range, which is interesting because they were using machine guns. The local settlers attempted to direct the emus into an ambush, but they failed at this because the birds split into small groups and ran, so they were incredibly difficult to target. This is the real target practice. The first round of shots from the military was not effective because of the range. A second round of gunfire was able to kill about a dozen birds. That was a disgraceful outing. The second outing on 4th November. The men stayed in an ambush close to a local dam. They could see over 1,000 emus coming toward them. And this time, learning from their initial experience, the farmers waited until the birds were nearby before opening fire. You won't believe what happened next. Their guns jammed after only 12 birds were killed. And as you would expect, the others scattered before they could fire any more shots. Sadly, they couldn't see any more birds on that day. Subsequently, the men moved south, where there were reports that the birds were much more domesticated. Even at that, there was hardly any success. They discovered that each pack of birds seemed to have its leader, usually a bigger bird. That keeps watch while they destroy crops and warn them of any aggression. This discovery didn't do them any good or help in their emus killing mission. By the 8th of November, 2,500 rounds had been fired, and according to an account, only 50 birds had been killed. Other accounts stated it was between 200 to 500 birds. Regardless of the accounts you choose to believe, one thing everybody agreed on was that it was a terrible outing against the emus. As a result, the Minister of Defense withdrew the military personnel and the guns on the 8th of November. Here's a comment made by the commander of the troops, Major Meredith. He said, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They can face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. They are like Zulus, whom even dum-dum bullets could not stop." One of the best statements about an army. Only in this case, it was about birds. Round 2. After the military withdrew, the emus didn't stop their attack on the farmlands and crops. One could argue that they got even more emboldened in their ravage this time. The farmers complained again, and a resumption of military activities was approved by the Minister of Defense. The minister even had to defend this decision in the Senate and explained why the soldiers were necessary to combat the serious agricultural threat of the large emu population. Major Meredith was put on the field with his men. The military was able to kill about 40 emus within the first 2 days. On 15th November, the third day, they were less successful. However, by 2nd December 1932, the soldiers were killing approximately 100 emus per week. Major Meredith was recalled on the 10th of December, and he claimed in his report that there were 986 confirmed emus killed with 9,860 rounds, while 2,500 others had died from wounds. Overall, this was a bad outing for Major Meredith and his men. 986 killed birds in this war out of 20,000 emus is less than 5%, and had no impact on the initial complaints of the farmers and their crops. The emus continued to ravage and destroy their farms. Australia had lost the war against birds. The farmers continued to request military assistance in subsequent years, 1934, 1943, and 1948. But this time they were turned down by the government. The word of this war spread in 1932 and reached the United Kingdom, where it was met with protests by conservationists. Some described it as a mass destruction of birds. After this war, a less violent means was adopted by the farmers: exclusion barrier fencing. This became a popular means of keeping emus out of agricultural areas. Even today, it helps to manage the undesirable impact of medium-sized to large-sized mammals, including wild dogs, feral pigs, and macropods. The Australian encounter with emus was an interesting one. We're sure you found it interesting and educating too. Please subscribe to our channel if you did. We have a goal to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Help us hit this goal. Thank you for watching.